Waiting for our jury. Getting a picture of all. Yes, you get the ballot. Yes, right there. Okay, so before we start our judges, we're just looking around. This is the rounds listed as Nelson B. St. Clair. Are both sides present, ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor.
Start with plaintiff, negative appearance.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning. My name is Aniyah Nelson. And today I, alongside my colleague, Mr. Alex Lincoln,
Good morning, Your Honor.
we represent the estate of Samuel Farnsworth in today's proceedings.
Morning.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning. My name is Emberlynn St. Hilaire. Today I'm joined by my co-counsel, Mr. Ethan Donovan,
Good morning, Your Honor.
and together we represent the city of Philadelphia.
Morning. Anything we need to take out before we just start with plaintiff?
Nothing from the plaintiff, Your Honor.
Nothing from the defense.
Okay, anyone else before the court will be presiding on the ballot. So I always suggest that you direct your argument to the jury, not the bench, but especially so we can.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right.
Opening from the plaintiff, Your Honor.
Yes.
May it please the court. Ms. St. Clair. Members of the jury. The city cut corners. And Sam Farnsworth paid the price. It's February 9th of 2025. And all across the city, residents are flooding out of bars, out of restaurants, out of their homes, and into the streets of the city. You see, the Philadelphia Eagles just won the Super Bowl for the first time in nearly a decade. And the residents of the city, they want to celebrate. So they rush into the streets. They start climbing light poles. Members of the jury, they're screaming, they're excited. And on one street, the corner right outside of this building, there's a young man standing at the bottom of a light pole as his friend climbs 12, 15, 18 feet up into the air. He's standing at the bottom and watches his friend hit the top, when all of a sudden his friend slips, falls, knocks him backwards, and slams his head on the metal fence behind. And as his blood goes seeping into the concrete below, he takes his final breath. Members of the jury, that man's name was Sam Farnsworth. Today you'll learn that on that day in February, he died. Might be asking yourself, how did what was supposed to be a normal post-game celebration turn into such a devastating tragedy? Well, today you'll learn that the decision that killed Mr. Farnsworth, it didn't happen on February 9th, or February 8th, or February 7th, or February 6th. It happened 3 weeks early in an office right in City Hall. When the city learned that the safety measures that it was taking to protect its citizens, they weren't working. You see, the city has a department whose responsibility it is to keep the residents of Philadelphia safe, to make sure that during those post-game celebrations, people don't find light poles and people don't die. But members of the jury, today you'll learn that the city was failing at both. You'll learn that just 3 weeks before Mr. Farnsworth died, the city learned that they had the highest number of reports of people climbing those poles that they'd ever had. And that they were expecting even more people to run into the streets for the Super Bowl. But today you'll learn that even though the city knew that, they didn't take any steps to protect the residents of the city. And that's why we're here in court today. Because today, the estate of Sam Farnsworth is bringing a claim of negligence against the city of Philadelphia. What that means is that as the plaintiff, it's our responsibility to prove 3 things by a preponderance of the evidence, or more likely than not. We'll show you that first, the city had a duty to protect its residents. Second, that the city cut corners, and third, that when the city cut those corners, Sam Farnsworth paid the price. So in order to show you that, we're going to ask you to focus on 2 major corners that the city chose to cut. First, that they chose not to put grease on the light poles in the city. And second, that the city didn't take steps to increase the police presence during that post-game celebration. So let's start with that first corner that the city chose to cut, not putting grease on the poles. Today you'll learn that back in 2018, the city decided that in order to make it more difficult for people to climb light poles during these celebrations, well, they put grease on. That by putting grease, they'd prevent people from climbing those poles. But today you'll learn that in 2025, the city abandoned that practice altogether. You'll learn that as soon as they did that, as soon as they decided to stop greasing those poles, well, the reports of the number of people climbing them, it's skyrocketed. And an 18-year-old boy lost his life. But 3 weeks later, when it came time for the city to make a decision about whether or not they were going to grease those poles, even though they knew that climbings were going up, even though they knew that a man had just died, falling off a pole, they still decided not to grease it. And today you'll hear from Mr. Lanny Davidson, and he's the person who climbed that pole and fell on Mr. Farnsworth in February. He'll tell you himself that had that pole been greased, never would have climbed it at all. So let's move on to that second corner that the city chose to cut, not increasing the police presence. Today you'll learn that the city expected 100,000 people to fill the streets of Philadelphia after the Super Bowl. But even though they expected the highest crowd that they'd ever had, well, they didn't take steps to increase the police presence in the city at all. And today, Mr. Davidson, he'll tell you himself that when he climbed that pole in February, not a single police officer told him to stop. He didn't hear a single police officer at all. So members of the jury, over the course of today's trial, you'll learn that the city cut corners. Sam Farnsworth paid the price. That's why at the end of today's trial, I'll come before you again. I'll ask you to find the city of Philadelphia liable. Thank you.
Opening your arms. The city was greasy. The fan was wrapped. The Eagles had just won the Super Bowl. And Sam Farnsworth is having the best night of his life. He's in the streets of Philadelphia. He's surrounded by a sea of green, but in that, he's not paying attention to the confetti falling from the sky or the fans chanting. No, he's looking 12, 16, 18 feet in the air as his friend, another fan, climbs a light pole. He yells out, "Don't do it!" Gets ignored. So he repeats himself, "Hey, don't do it!" He's ignored again. And that fails. Before he even makes it to the top of that light pole, well, his shoe slips. He loses his balance and he comes crashing down onto Sam Barnes. Sam, he doesn't survive the impact. Members of the jury, everyone, and I mean everyone in this court, will agree. This should have never happened. The evidence, it's going to show that it wasn't the city's fault. That it was the fan who climbed the light pole, a man named Randy Davis, who chose to ignore every precaution the city took to keep people like him and Sam safe. The city was racing. The fan was crackling. And that's a problem for the plaintiff. Because today they have the first burden of proof. It's their job to prove to you by a preponderance of the evidence, meaning that it's more likely than not that they failed to exercise a duty of care. And that as a result, Sam Farnsworth died. Now, today, they're not going to be able to meet that burden, and frankly, they're not even be able to come close. But even if you think that they do, their job, it doesn't stop there. Because we brought what's called an affirmative defense, a third-party comparative call. Now, what that means is we're going to ask you to take a look at the actions of Lanny Davidson. And at the end of the trial, you're going to be asked a simple question. Well, how much of the fault belongs to the city of Philadelphia? And how much belongs to Lanny Davidson? And if you find that he was even 50%, you can't find the city liable. So today we're going to ask you to focus on two really simple things. The city was reasonable. The fan was proper. Now let's start with that first fact, the city was reasonable. Because today we're actually going to call the director of public safety to this witness. Opposing counsel just told you a moment ago that this city cut corners. She's going to tell you that the decision to stop greasing those poles, well, it was reasonable. She's going to tell you, well, it wasn't stopping people from climbing. So she switched up her strategy. She put fences up around every light pole in the city. They want to say they cut corners. You're going to hear they put police officers on every single pole. So that brings us to fact number 2. The fan was right. Members of the jury, Lanny Davis You're gonna hear today he ignored every precaution the city took. That he ignored the police, that he ignored the warning, that he ignored those fences. You're gonna see it was Mr. Davidson who wasn't reasonable. That it wasn't reasonable when he went 18 feet in the air above his friend, knowing it was illegal, knowing it was dangerous. That's why we're here. No one is gonna try to convince you that what happened wasn't a tragedy, it was. No one is gonna try to convince you that what happened is right, because it wasn't. But today, your job is to separate tragedy from liability. And if you do that, you're gonna see the city was reasonable. The family's rights. At the end of this trial, I'm gonna come before you again and ask you to find Philadelphia not liable. Thank you.
At this time, Your Honor, the plaintiff calls Mr. Lanny Davidson to the stand. May I proceed?
Yes.
Good morning, sir. Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Hello, my name is Lanny Davidson.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a law student, a rising 2L at UCLA.
Sir, where are you from?
I like to say I'm from Philly, right here. But a lot of the time when I say that, they ask me the question the second time. I was born in Abuja, Nigeria.
Mr. Davidson, I want to talk about why you're here in court today. Do you know someone named Sam Farnsworth?
I do. Samuel was my best friend.
How did the two of you meet?
We used to do the same club when we were in college. We went to different schools, but we bonded over the fact that we both lived in Philly.
Sir, could you turn to Exhibit 1 and that binder in front of you? Would Your Honor like me to sit down?
I'm there.
Sir, do you recognize that photo?
I do. This is Samuel.
Is it a fair and accurate copy of that photo?
It is.
Has it been changed or altered in any way since the last time that you saw it?
No.
Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff offers Exhibit 1 into evidence.
No objection.
When is it admitted?
Permission to publish to the jury.
Okay.
Mr. Davidson, were you with Mr. Farnsworth on February 9th of 2025?
I was. We were celebrating the Super Bowl.
So were you there when Mr. Farnsworth died?
I was. I was right next to him.
Can you tell us a bit about what happened?
We were outside celebrating, and I saw a light pole and I wanted to climb it. This was something I'd seen people do countless times before. When I got up there, I fell and he died.
Sir, I want to be upfront with the members of the jury. Are you a part of a settlement agreement here in court today?
At first, the Farnsworth family, they thought I may have been the reason that Sam died. I explained to them that it was an accident. We settled the suit.
All right, sir, then I want to walk through what happened on February. Where were you and Sam when the Super Bowl ended that month?
I don't know if you saw the score, but it was a blowout. As soon as the whistle blew, we rushed outside. Us, everybody, we started celebrating.
Sir, what was the crowd like?
It was rowdy. People were singing, dancing, jumping on cars, climbing light poles.
Sir, if there were all of those people out on the streets, I want to talk about the police. Did you see any police when you were celebrating with the other fans?
I saw a handful, but they were just kind of standing around, looking.
Sir, you mentioned that you climbed a light pole back. When you approached that light pole, what did you see?
The only thing between me and the light pole was a small fence. I just stepped over it.
Mr. Davidson, when you stepped over the light pole, did you hear any police officers try to stop you?
No,
So when you started climbing that light pole, did you hear any police officers try to stop you then?
no, all I heard was people cheering me on.
Sir, at any point, while you were climbing that light pole, did you hear any police officers at all?
No, ma'am.
All right, so we talked about the police. I want to talk about what the city did during those celebrations. Sir, do you know, or have you seen the city take any steps to prevent people from climbing those light poles?
In the past, I've seen people putting grease on the side of the light pole, so you can't climb.
Objection, confusing the issues, may I be heard? Your Honor, we have it on a good faith basis, but there is no evidence or studies to suggest that increasing the light poles decreases the amount of incidents or that any other city in America increases street pools to prevent crime.
How does that confuse the issue?
Yes, Your Honor, it confuses the issues because it suggests to the jury that increasing the light poles is an example of the city exercising ordinary care.
Yes, Your Honor. It's the plaintiff's contention today that the reason why Mr. Farnsworth died is because the city elected not to grease those light poles, and that's one of the reasons why Mr. Davidson fell off. Your Honor, this isn't substantially more confusing than it is probative. It goes directly to what steps the city did and didn't take during that celebration.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, it's the plaintiff's burden to prove that the city failed to exercise ordinary care. That's the standard. To have this testimony in the record, it confuses the jury as to whether or not greasing the poles is ordinary care. We need some other evidence.
Well, I think they're trying to prevent that. So I don't think it confuses the issues at all. To the extent that there's a relevance issue, this goes to weight. You'll be able to cross-examine the director on witness. If you don't agree.
Yes, Your Honor.
Objections overruled.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Davidson, did you get a chance to finish your answer?
I was just saying that I've seen people put grease alongside the light pole. That makes it slippery and harder to climb.
Sir, could you flip to exhibit 22 and that binder, let me know when you're there.
I'm there.
Sir, do you recognize that photo?
I do. This is a picture of a light pole with some grease alongside it.
Is it a fair and accurate copy of that light?
It is.
Has it been changed or altered in any way since the last time that you saw it?
No, ma'am.
Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff offers exhibit 22,
No objection.
22 is admitted.
permission to publish.
And I'll give both parties standing permission to publish it. It's admitted, you don't have it.
Yes, Your Honor. Sir, have you ever been in the city of Philadelphia while those poles were being greased?
I have, of course. Back in 2022, after a big baseball game, everybody was outside celebrating. I was face to face with one of those light poles with the grease on it.
Back in 2022, when you saw that pole with grease on it, did you try to climb it?
No, when I saw the grease, I thought it would be too slippery, so I didn't even try.
Objection, lack of foundation. May I be heard?
But
As to the statement that the pool would be too slippery, this witness already stated they didn't touch the pool, try to climb it. To testify that the grease would make it too slippery to climb, where there's lack of foundation from.
Opposed?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Davidson's exact statement was that when he saw the grease on the pole, he thought it would be too slippery to climb. There's no foundation issue here. He's testifying to what his belief was when he approached the pole.
Yes, Your Honor.
Sir, did you get a chance to finish?
I looked at the pole, I saw that grease on it. I didn't try.
So, sir, if you didn't try to climb that pole with grease in 2022, let's talk about the pole that you did climb. Could you flip to exhibit 36 and that line?
I'm there.
Sir, do you recognize that photo?
I do. This is a picture of the light pole that I climbed on February 9th.
Is it a fair and accurate copy of that photo?
It is.
Has it been changed or altered in any way since the last time you saw it?
No,
Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff offers exhibit 36,
No objection.
36 minutes.
published into the jury. Sir, when you approached that light pole on February 9th, was there any grease on it?
no. The first thing I did was I wiped my hand down the pole to see if there was grease. I didn't feel anything.
Sir, if there had been grease on that pole on February 9th, would you ever have climbed it?
Objection calls for speculation.
Your Honor, I'm asking this witness what he would have done. That doesn't require him to step into someone else's mind state. It's not speculation.
Response, Your Honor. You're asking this witness to testify to a hypothetical about something that didn't happen and step into his mindset then, with conditions that he already stated weren't present the night of.
Your Honor, Mr. Davidson already testified that in 2022, when he approached that light pole with grease on it, he decided not to climb it because it was too slippery. It doesn't require him to speculate. To ask him that, have there been grease on the pole in 2025? Would you have climbed it or would you have not? There's no speculation.
May I respond?
So,
Yes, Your Honor.
So, sir, I'll re-ask that question. If there had been grease on that pole on February 9th, would you ever have climbed it?
No, if I had felt grease on that pole, I would not have climbed it.
Or what happened when you climbed that?
When I got to the top, for the first 5 seconds, it felt amazing. And then I started to climb back down. And I slipped. I got up and I looked at Samuel. I looked at Samuel and he. Do I have to answer this question?
I'm sorry, sir, you do.
I looked at Samuel and nothing. I started shaking him, screaming at him, wake up. Nothing. That's when the police came. They zipped him in a body bag. The next time I saw him was his funeral.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Cross, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Davidson.
Hello, Master.
Sir, you were pretty close to sitting on this side of the courtroom with the defense. What do you agree?
If you mean as a defendant, yes, at first.
Sir, you were a defendant in this lawsuit, right?
At first, I was, yes.
You said on direct examination that the Farnsworth family thought you may have been at fault.
That's what they thought, yes.
Sir, that's what they thought. You fell on their side, right?
I did, Ma'am.
Sir, they started blaming you, true?
That's how it started, yes.
They saddled you with a lawsuit, right?
They sued me.
But then they came to you and said they changed their mind, true?
Yes, they were very understanding people. I explained the situation. We agreed to settle.
Sir, when you say they were understanding, they came to you and said, you're a law student, you don't have money, correct?
That was something they said to me.
Sir, after they said you were a law student, you didn't have money, they dropped the case, right?
Yes, after I explained it was an accident, they told me they understood. They knew I didn't have much money. We settled.
You saddled them, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you tell the members of the jury how much you had to pay the Farnsworth family?
Only $1.
You had to pay them $1. That's it.
Yes, ma'am. It wasn't about the money.
Well, you didn't just have to give them $1, you also had to agree to give them testimony today, right?
That's right. I agreed to come to court and talk about what happened.
After they said, well, we're not gonna sue you, the law student, without any money, they said, will you testify for us against the city of Philadelphia? Right?
That's true.
Sir, you agree, right?
I did.
On direct examination, you said that no police officers tried to stop you.
That's right.
You said on direct examination that you wouldn't have climbed that pole if there had been grease. Did I get that?
For sure.
So let's be clear, when you say these things, you're saying after you made a deal with these plaintiffs, right?
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Then I want to talk if you were right. Because let's be abundantly clear, Sam Farnsworth didn't die because he decided to climb an 18-foot pole.
No, it wasn't his fault.
He died after you did, right?
I did, yes.
No one forced you to climb the pole.
Nobody forced me to.
It was your idea and your ideal.
It was my idea.
Sir, you knew it was illegal.
I knew it was illegal, yes.
You knew it could be dangerous, right?
I knew it was risky.
You didn't care.
I cared about the risk. I tried to be safe. That's why I checked for the grease. I tried to climb up slowly.
You cared about the risk, sir. You climbed up a pole 18 feet in the air despite knowing it could be dangerous, right?
I did, ma'am.
You climbed up an 18-foot pole over a crowd of people, Trip.
No, not over a crowd of people. It was me, Sam, and then a fence around the pole.
All right, sir. You chose to climb 18 feet in the air over your best friend.
I did, yes.
Sir, the reason you did is because you were proud of Philly fans' crazy behavior. Those are your words, right?
There are. I love this city. I wanted to be a part of it.
The reason you did it is you thought it would be fun, right?
That's true.
Let's talk about if your decision to have fun was right. Because I want to recreate the scene from that night. When you approached the light pole, you saw a fence around, right?
I did.
You'd recognize a picture of that fence if I showed it to you.
I was.
Did you flip to exhibit 35 in that binder? Let the record reflect, I can approach the opposing counsel with exhibit 35. Sir, do you recognize this one?
I do. This isn't the exact fence that I climbed, but it's a fence that looks just like it.
Hasn't changed or altered in any way?
No.
Move to enter exhibit 35.
Without objection, Rob.
35.
Sure, let's take a good look at this picture. Because this is the fence that was surrounding the light pole that you tried to climb, right?
It was a fence that looked just like this one, yes.
Sir, it's linked, sure.
Yes,
You can't just walk right through.
no, I stepped over the fence.
That's right, to get over this fence, you had to hop over, right?
I stepped over it, yes.
The fence, it didn't stop you, did it?
No,
Sir, there were also police surrounding that light pole, sure.
there were a handful of police in the area. None of them were standing around or surrounding the light.
Sir, that's a yes, you saw police in the area.
That's a yes, I saw police in the area.
That didn't stop you either, you still climbed the pole.
No, the police didn't stop me.
Sir, are you saying you need the police to personally tell you not to break the law, for you not to break it?
No, ma'am, I'm saying the police did not stop me.
So, sir, you saw police there, you climbed the pole in.
Yes, ma'am.
Sam, he told you, don't climb the pole too. Sir,
That's true.
that didn't, sorry, sir.
No, yes, that's what Sam said.
That didn't stop you either.
No, it didn't.
Sir, as you were climbing that pole, Sam kept begging you to come down.
That's true. He was telling me to come down.
But just like the law. The fence, and the first time Sam told you, don't do it. You ignored him again.
Yes, ma'am. I did.
Thank you. No further questions. Permission, summary published in the file.
Brief redirect remark. Sir, just a moment ago, Ms. St. Hilaire asked you about the police that night. I want to make clear. Were there any police standing by the light pole when you find it?
No, ma'am. There were a few around the streets, looking around, nobody saying anything, nobody doing anything.
Sir, what would have stopped you from climbing the pole then?
I know if I saw grease on that light pole, if I felt grease on that light pole, I would not have climbed it.
Thank you, sir. Nothing further, Your Honor.
No recall.
You may step down. Thank you very much.
At this time, Your Honor, the plaintiff rests its case in chief.
The defense plan on consent mitigation.
Yes, Your Honor. We call Walker Edwards to the stand. May I proceed? Good morning, ma'am. Can you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Good morning. My name is Walker Edwards.
What do you do for a living?
I'm the Director of Public Safety for the entire city of Philadelphia.
What's your educational background?
I have a master's degree in public policy from Drexel University right here in Philadelphia. I have 2 bachelor's degrees, one in urban studies and one in criminal justice. Both are from UCLA.
What's involved in your job as the safety director for this?
I'm in charge of keeping our citizens safe. I create safety plans for big events in the city.
Were you involved in creating a safety plan for the post-win Super Bowl celebrations in 2025?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
Ma'am, I want to talk about if the city was reasonable. Now, how did you prepare for that?
I started by making a safety plan. I created and planned out everything that would take place that day before it happened.
What were your safety concerns?
The fans for sports teams in Philadelphia, they can get a bit excited when our team does well. We were concerned about fans looting, breaking things, climbing the things they weren't supposed to be
There's a
on.
lack of foundation. May I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, Ms. Edwards just testified that we were concerned about people looting, about people breaking things. Your Honor, there's no foundation on the record as to who Ms. Edwards is talking about, who else was concerned about these things. We need to hear that foundation on the record before she testifies to that.
Response, Your Honor. She's just testifying as to her department in her capacity as the safety director. We can have her rephrase to say aye.
Can you clarify?
Yes, Your Honor. Ma'am, what were your safety concerns?
Well, working for the city, I was concerned about the fans getting too rowdy, climbing up things like poles, looting, breaking things.
Ma'am, did you ever try to come up with ideas on how to stop people climbing poles?
Absolutely. I wanted to experiment with different ideas, different plans to see what would stop and prevent people from climbing up poles in the city.
Did you ever try greasing the pole?
Yes. I enacted that plan in 2018 for the first time.
Ma'am, when you enacted the plan to grease the pole, were you aware of any other city in America who took that action?
No, ma'am. I had never heard of any other city in America doing something like that.
Ma'am, my nephew tells me there was an international soccer game in town. Were you aware of any other international city who were greasing poles?
No, ma'am, I try to stay up to date. I've never seen anything about it internationally either.
Ma'am, when you started greasing the poles, how did that work out?
Put grease on the poles for a few celebrations and the fans kept climbing them. It didn't stop.
What did you do?
We experimented with new ideas. We wanted to see if there was anything else that we could do to try and stop them from climbing up the pole since the grease didn't work.
Objection, Your Honor, to lack of foundation. May I be heard?
Lack of foundations to what?
The witness just testified that the grease that they put on the poles didn't work. Your Honor, at this point, we haven't heard any foundation as to how this witness is able to make that conclusion. We need to hear that foundation on record.
Response, Your Honor. The question previously, this witness testified that she saw people climbing even though there was grease on.
Response, Your Honor. Your Honor, I don't believe this witness laid any foundation to that effect either. She said people were still climbing. We didn't hear any foundation as to how she knows that, whether she saw it, whether other people told her it was happening. There's been no foundation for that testimony.
I'm gonna allow this for opinion, not an expert opinion.
Yes, Your Honor.
Ma'am, is it true that you stopped greasing those poles to cut corners?
Absolutely not. We stopped greasing the poles because we thought that it was still dangerous for the citizens.
Well, ma'am, let's talk about these other measures that you said you experimented.
Of course,
Now, for the Super Bowl in 2025, what measures did you put in?
we did three things. The first was we put fences around the poles, a barricade to try and stop people from getting in. The second was public announcements to let everyone know they shouldn't climb poles. And the third was police officers to patrol the street.
Well, I want to break down that plan at one time. Let's start with those fences. Now, where did you put up fences in the city?
Around every single pole in Center City. That's where the fans gather after the games.
Then let's talk about those public announcements. How are you telling the public not to climb poles?
We made the public very aware through the news, do not climb the poles, it's dangerous, you could get hurt. But they will be,
Speculation. May I be heard?
Which portion of the answer you get?
Your Honor, Ms. Edwards said we made the public very aware. Your Honor, we believe that.
Well, we'll get to the argument section. No, you're objecting speculation that the portion you said you made public very aware.
Yes, Your Honor.
Response?
First, Your Honor, this witness isn't speculating. She's testifying that she put these announcements on social media, on the news. That's enough for her to say that they were making the public aware.
The response, Your Honor? Your Honor, they can say that they posted things on social media, that they made public statements. But this witness is taking it a step further. She's saying we made the public aware, that people were aware of these protocols. That requires this witness to step into the mindset of other people in the city and their knowledge of the statements that they were releasing. That speculation is inadmissible.
Response, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, the witness there's enough foundation for this witness to say that they were making the public aware generally. She put it on the news, on social media. That's enough for her to make that.
You have evidence about how well the public understood this, or whether it was, giving surveys and the public knew this information, or is it just witness testifying of what she did?
It's the witness testifying what she did, that she was doing the act of making the public aware. Not necessarily if the public was aware, but that's what she was doing when making news articles and things of that nature.
The response, Your Honor?
It's a close call, witness sustained the objection. The witness can testify to steps she would see did to make the public aware, but I'm not the witness testify that the city and public was made aware. I think that doesn't, whatever you presenting a case, but we'll be precise.
Yes, Your Honor. Move to strike that testimony, Your Honor.
That's fair.
Ma'am, what steps did you take to notify the public?
We put out announcements on the news. Don't climb the pole. It's dangerous, and if you did, you'd be prosecuted.
Then let's talk about that last part of the plan, the police. How many police officers did you deploy for Super Bowl night?
We had about 40 police officers patrolling every 2 blocks of the city.
All right, if that's what the city did, I want to talk about if the fan was right. Now, are you familiar with Sam Farnsworth?
I am. Sam Farnsworth was one of the fans who was on the streets during the Super Bowl celebration in 2025. I was familiar with what happened to him through a police incident report I read about the situation.
Would you recognize that police incident report if I showed it to you today?
Yes, ma'am, I think I would.
The record reflects, your Honor, can you turn to exhibit 6 in your file?
Of course. I'm there.
Ma'am, what is this document?
This is the incident report about what happened to Mr. Farnsworth on February 9th of 2025.
Who was it made by?
Philadelphia Police Department.
Has it been changed, altered in any way?
No, ma'am, not as far as I can tell.
At this time, we need to enter exhibit 6.
Without objection, Your Honor.
At this time, I'm publishing to the jury. Ma'am, for reading this incident report, what happened to Sam Farnsworth?
Mr. Farnsworth was near one of our poles in the city. It says that his best friend Lenny Davidson climbed up the pole, and that's when one of our police officers saw him doing it.
Sir, ma'am, according to this incident, did that police officer tell Lenny Davidson to get down from the pole?
Yes, ma'am, of course he did. As soon as he saw, it says that he said, "Get down off the pole." He instructed Mr. Davidson to climb down.
According to this incident, were any other commands given by that police officer to Lenny Davidson?
Yes, it says later in the report that after he yelled, "Get down," Mr. Davidson kept climbing and he said, "This is the police. I'm ordering you down now." That's what it said.
According to this incident report, did Lenny Davidson get down after those commands from that police officer?
No, ma'am, it says that he fell and he landed on Mr. Farnsworth.
Thank you, ma'am, for your time. No further questions.
Cross-examination, Your Honor. Ma'am, I want to pick up right where you left off with that police report that you just spoke about with Miss St. Hilaire. Do you still have that in front of you?
Yes, ma'am, if you could give me some time to turn back to the page.
Of course.
Thank you. I'm
Miss Edwards, the police officer who wrote this report, they were stationed at the block where Mr. Farnsworth died. True.
That's right, ma'am.
Miss Edwards, according to this report, there were over 1,000 people on that block of the city alone. True.
Yes, that's correct.
And even though there were over 1,000 people on just that block, well, according to this report, this officer was stationed there with just one other officer. True.
That's right, ma'am. This officer was about 150 feet away from the incident.
That's right, ma'am. When Davidson started climbing that pole, that police officer was 150 feet away, right?
That's right, ma'am. That was the officer that was posted near the incident.
Ma'am, according to that report, that officer that was 150 feet away, they were the closest officer too.
That's what this police officer says in his report, that's right.
Ma'am, we can agree that if the closest officer is 150 feet away, would it be difficult to pull someone down from a light, right?
Yes, if he's standing 150 feet away, that's right.
We can agree that if the closest officer is 150 feet away, and there are over 1,000 people on just that city hall, well, it can be difficult to tell someone to come down from a light, right?
No, ma'am, this police officer says that he instructed Mr. Davidson to get down when he climbed up the pole.
Ma'am, I want to be clear. When that police officer first saw Lanny Davidson on that pole, they were standing right next to him, right?
No, ma'am, not right beside.
They had to make their way through the crowd just to get to Mr. Davidson, sure?
That's right, ma'am, but the police officer instructed Mr. Davidson down the pole before he started to walk over.
Ma'am, that wasn't my question. I'm asking if the police officer had to make their way through a crowd of over 1,000 people just to get to Mr. Davidson, and that's it.
Yes, ma'am, this police officer did have to do that. That's right.
All right, ma'am. I want to talk about whether or not this city cut corners when it was preparing for this event, starting with the police. Because we can agree that the post-game celebrations in Philadelphia, they were getting bigger and bigger every single year, right?
That's right. The fans, they were very eager to celebrate. More and more people started to join the celebrations in the street.
That's right, ma'am. In January of 2025, when the Eagles won the NFC championship, there was a post-game celebration, right?
Yes,
Ma'am, we can agree that you saw that there were over 80,000 people at that celebration, true?
Objection, ma'am.
Your Honor, the question asked Grace was you saw that there were over 80,000 people at that celebration. I'm asking this witness what she saw, what she personally observed. There's no speculation.
Your Honor, question as phrased was that there was 80,000 people that called the police, especially if they want to ask whether you saw it or whether you saw a report about it, they can ask that, but the question is was.
Yes, Your Honor. So ma'am, during that celebration in January of 2025, you saw that there were over 80,000 people in, right?
yes, that was the estimation, 80,000.
Ma'am, you thought that that celebration after the Super Bowl would be even bigger, right?
Yes, we were planning to be safe for a larger number of people than that, of course.
Ma'am, for that celebration with 80,000 people, you assigned 200 police officers to the street, right?
Yes, that was about 40 police officers for every 2 blocks, like I mentioned earlier.
But for that Super Bowl celebration, you were expecting over 100,000 people in the streets of Philadelphia, right?
Yes, that was the estimation before the event started.
Man, we can agree that 80,000 to 100,000, that's 20,000 more people in the streets that you're responsible, right?
Yes, ma'am, that's right.
So ma'am, if you thought there were going to be 20,000 more people in the streets of Philadelphia, well, how much did you increase the number of police from January to February of 2025?
We had 200 police officers patrolling the streets.
So ma'am, you're telling us that you kept that number the same from January to February?
That's right, ma'am. That's the number of police officers that we've had patrolling the area. Once again, those numbers are estimations. We estimate how many people we think might be there, and 200 police officers, that was what we thought would be safe for the streets.
Ms. Edwards, I want to make sure I have this right. You were expecting 20,000 more people to be at the Super Bowl celebration, and you put 0 extra police officers on the street.
Yes, ma'am, that's right.
All right, ma'am, we talked about the police. I want to talk about something else that you mentioned. You said, when you were talking with Miss St. Hilaire, you said you wanted to experiment with safety protocols. Do I have that right?
Absolutely. When we saw that one method we tried hadn't worked, we wanted to try something more effective and more efficient.
Man, let's talk about whether or not your experiments ever went wrong. Because in 2018, you started putting grease on the light poles of the city, right?
That's right.
Ma'am, we can agree that you kept greasing the poles from 2018 all the way through the end of 2024, right?
Yes,
But ma'am, in 2025, you stopped greasing the poles entirely. True?
yes. That's when we wanted to try a new method. Like you were talking about earlier, there were gonna be more people there. We couldn't do something that had been previously ineffective at the last celebration.
Ma'am, let's talk about whether or not taking the grease off of the poles was effective at all. Because at the first celebration after you decided to take grease off of the poles, the number of reports you got of people climbing them, well, it skyrocketed, right?
Objection, Pearson.
Response. Your Honor, we're not using the numbers contained within those reports for the truth of the matter asserted, but rather the effect on the listener. That after the city decided to stop greasing the poles, even though they saw that the number of climbers was going up, they still chose not to grease them in February of 2025. Once again, not using those numbers for the truth, just for the effect they had on us.
How does this not be noticed?
Your Honor, as they said in their opening statements, they're gonna set out to prove that stopping the greasing of the poles was a mistake, that it wasn't in fact. They're certainly using it for the truth, if that's what they outlined in their opening statement. They're trying to backfill and use it.
I don't agree. I will give a little instruction. Very thoroughly consider this for the notice to the defendant. The judge of the rule, you reaction well.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
So, Ms. Edwards, at the first post-game celebration after the city stopped greasing the poles, the number of reports you had of people climbing light poles, well, it skyrocketed, right?
That's right, but the percentage overall decreased, showing it was effective.
Ma'am, that's a yes to my question. The number of reports you had of people climbing, they skyrocketed.
That's right, but there were more people there. So even though the individual number increased, we saw results that overall it was effective.
Ma'am, I want to be clear. From January to February, the number of people that you thought were going to be on the streets, it didn't quintuple, did it?
Quintuple? No, ma'am, it didn't quintuple, but it increased. Like you were saying earlier, more fans started to show up.
But ma'am, based on the reports you saw, the number of people climbing the poles, well, it did quintuple, didn't it?
Yes, ma'am, just as the number of people attending the celebrations did as well.
Ma'am, it wasn't just the number of people climbing the poles that increased. Someone died at that celebration in January. True.
Unfortunately, yes, Monsieur Moltro.
Ma'am,
Yes.
even after. The number of reports you saw of people climbing those poles went up even after someone died. You still chose not to grease the poles during that Super Bowl celebration.
Yes, because we thought it would be dangerous and cause more people to fall. The grease was slippery.
Ma'am, that's a yes. Even with that information, you chose to keep your plan the same.
That's right, ma'am, and try new methods.
All right, Ms. Edwards. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Reader,
Go ahead.
ma'am, you were asked on cross-examination about the number of reports increasing. I want to be clear. From 2008 to 2018, did the numbers increase when you started greasing?
No, they didn't.
Ma'am, when you were, during the time you were greasing the poles, the numbers increased from game to game.
Yes, that's right.
Did greasing the poles stop people from climbing?
No, it didn't. We greased the poles. We saw videos, people were still climbing. It was proven to be ineffective because we were supposed to be stopping the climb. It didn't work.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Anything else from the plan?
No recall, Your Honor.
Thank you for your time. You can step down.
Thank you.
At this time, we rest our case in chief.
We give each party 30 seconds And then if you can put the cost for their, probably you can start those along. Good to go.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed? May it please the court, Ms. Hilaire, members of the jury. Their plan didn't work. In January of 2025, they tried. They tried not greasing the polls. And not only did the number of reports of people climbing them went up, but someone died on their watch. And they did it again anyway. Members of the jury, when you institute a plan that gets someone killed and then you do it again anyway, that's not reasonable. But that's exactly what the city did. The city cut corners. And Sam Farnsworth paid the price, and that's why we're here in court today. Because the estate of Sam Farnsworth is bringing a claim of negligence against the city of Philadelphia. Now, today it was our responsibility to prove to you by a preponderance of the evidence, or more likely than not, three things. First, that the city had a duty of care to Sam Farnsworth. Second, that the city cut corners, and third, that when they did, well, Sam Farnsworth paid the price. Members of the jury, we met our burden today, and let's talk about how. Starting with that first prong, that the city had a duty of care to Sam Farnsworth. Members of the jury, not a single person during today's trial told you otherwise. Ms. Walker Edwards, she took that stand and she told you that as the director of public safety in Philadelphia, it's her responsibility to keep the people on the streets of Philadelphia safe. So no, she had a duty of care to Mr. Farnsworth, just like she has to every single resident in this city. But then let's move on to that second prong, that the city cut corners. Well, we showed you exactly how they did that too. We asked you to focus on two things. First, that the city chose not to grease the polls, and second, that the city didn't take any steps to increase the number of police that were in the city during that Super Bowl celebration. Now, members of the jury, today when I was listening to Ms. Edwards on the stand, I asked my colleague, Mr. Lee, to write down the excuse that she gave for not instituting a new plan. Mr. Lee, do you have?
I got it.
Members of the jury, Ms. Edwards took that stand and said, we experiment. Well, other cities don't do it, and we just try to do it ourselves. We were the first people to do it. Members of the jury, the director of public safety used the residents of Philadelphia as lab pets. She tested it out for the first time during a celebration with 80,000 people, and we know what happened. Someone died on her watch. And she said, let's run it back. Let's keep it the same. Members of the jury, that's not reasonable. Now today, when we told you about the grease, we told you that after they stopped greasing the polls, that person died, that reports of climbing skyrocketed So let's move on to that second point, the police presence in the city. Because today I heard that from that celebration in January of 2025 to February, Miss Edwards was expecting 20,000 more people to be in the streets of Philadelphia. But that even though she was expecting 20,000 more people, the number of police officers in the city, well, it stayed exactly the same. She said, well, it's good enough. And members of the jury, we know what happened when she decided to keep that plan the same, because today you heard that the closest police officer to Lanny Davidson on February 9th was 150 feet away. Members of the jury, we've been talking a lot about football today. That's half a football field away. They have just 2 officers stationed on a block of over 1,000 people. So members of the jury, of course, when that officer is shouting at Lanny Davidson to come down, when the officer is 150 feet away, Davidson's not going to hear you. When there aren't any police officers by the foot of that hill standing within a close vicinity of it, members of the jury, it makes sense why Lanny Davidson did what he did. So members of the jury, when you go back into deliberation, I want you to think about the fact that the city cut corners. Because even though they knew that their plan had gotten someone killed, they kept it the same. And Sam Farnsworth paid the price. Find the city of Philadelphia alive. Thank you. Close your eyes.
The city was reasonable. The fan right. Every day, we all wish we can make decisions for the people in our lives. You know, I tell my nephew, don't text and drive, but can't be with him every day when he goes to work. Think about the city. I mean, they put up traffic lights, stop signs, they even use those fancy speed guns, but every morning you're gonna see a line at the right traffic. And before Lanny Davidson chose to climb 18 feet in the air over his friend, Philadelphia deployed police officers. They put out warnings, they put up fences. He didn't care. The city, they can't control the actions of every single citizen. As much as we'd like to, it's impossible. Lanny Davidson made his way up there anyway. As much as myself, opposing counsel, the city, and the Farnsworth family wish to see happen. Truth. The city was reasonable. This fan was reckless. And that's a problem for the plaintiff, because they have the very first burden in today's case. They had to prove to you that it's more likely than not that the city was negligent, and that negligence caused Sam Farnsworth's death. And frankly, they haven't come close. Our very first fact that we told you about at the start of trial shows you exactly why the city was reasonable. Because all day, you can even tell you, well, the city was unreasonable because they cut corners. That they stopped reasonable, that was the corner they cut, and the reason they cut corners was, I don't know, they didn't give one. They didn't say it saved the city money. They didn't say it made the city look better. Does that make any sense? Why would the city cut corners if they didn't have to? Well, maybe it's because they didn't cut any corners at all. That public safety director took the stand and she told you why her decision was reasonable. That grease, it wasn't stopping people from climbing, that it actually made it harder and more dangerous because it was slippery to come down. Her choice was reasonable, but what the plaintiff wanted the city to do wasn't. I mean, she told you on direct examination, she wasn't aware of any other city in America who greases street poles before big games. Not Steelers fans, not Dodgers fans, not the fans of whoever wins the NBA Finals in a few hours. If Philadelphia is unreasonable for not greasing their poles, what does that say about every other city in America? They can't be unreasonable. Average the joke. They made a judgment call. They saw something wasn't working, so they put in a plan. It was 3 steps. You heard about it today. They deployed police officers, 40 for every 2 blocks. They put out warnings to the public. They put out fences. They ignored all of these. Now, a moment ago, they said, well, the police officer was too far, that they didn't have enough police officers in the city. But you're gonna have the incident when you go to deliver. It's gonna say that police officer told Lady Davidson, not once, but twice to get there. Yeah, maybe once 100 feet away, maybe if they have an excuse, it was just that. But you heard, and you're gonna see in this report, that that officer went up to the base of the pole, said, I'm an officer, come down, and Lady Davidson didn't listen. I mean, it makes you wonder if the pole had been, if Lady Davidson still finds it anyway, what, will they be asking us to take down every light pole in the city? What they're asking you to do isn't reason. Now, on direct examination, Mr. Davidson takes that and says, well, you know, I really wouldn't have climbed it if there had been grease on it. Trust me. Why he's saying that? I mean, he got to avoid all responsibility in today's case for the grand price of the testimony and no. And you really trust that he's not just trying to shift the blame now. No. Now, when you go to deliberate, you're going to be handed a lawyer form. It's going to ask you whether or not the city was negligent. We're going to ask you. But even if you answer yes to this question, you're going to be asked to apportion fault. How much fault belongs to the city and how much belongs to Lady Davidson? And today we showed you over and over that Lady Davidson was negligent. I want you to think about all the warnings this man had to ignore to get to the top of that pole. Warning number 1, his old friend saying, don't do it. He doesn't. Warning number 2, he sees a fence. I mean, he sees a barricade around the pole and he says, I don't care. Warning number 3, an officer of the law saying, get down from there. Now, even that's not. And at some point, if you're ignoring warning after warning after warning, the consequences, well, they have to fall on you and nobody else. Members of the jury, you can't act like Icarus, fly too close to the sun and then blame the sun. It's not how this works. City was reasonable. This ban was reckless. Don't corner Lady Davidson from responsibility. What happened is a tragedy. We understand that. I'm sure you understand that. But today, your job is to separate tragedy from liability. And when the law says you can't find someone negligent for something they weren't responsible for, when the evidence is saying the city was reasonable, the fan was reckless, you know what choice you have to make. Philadelphia isn't liable. Don't find yourself. Thank you.
How much time remains for rebuttal?
52 seconds. Yes, Your Honor. Members of the jury, Ms. St. Hilaire keeps saying the city was reasonable, the man was reckless. Well, if she wants to talk about recklessness, let's talk about it. Because when the city knows that a man died falling off of an ungreased pole and they still choose not to grease it, that's reckless. When the city is expecting 20,000 more people to show up in the streets and they choose not to add a single police officer, that's reckless. When the city chooses to implement the exact same plan that got someone killed, that is reckless. She stood before you just a moment ago and she said, why did the city cut corners when they didn't have to? Members of the jury were asking the exact same question. Because the city was reckless. The city cut corners. And Sam Farnsworth paid the price. Find the city law. Thank you.
Counsel?